Thank you very much, Colonel, for your kind introduction. And I'd like to give my respect to my distinguished colleague, Dato Muhammad Khalid bin Nurdin. And he mentioned earlier trust and confidence. I believe that the stable and strengthening defense relations between Malaysia and the Philippines and between us and the rest of ASEAN are a function of the close working relationships and trusts between our respective heads of state and heads of government and between Datu Khaled and our colleagues and us, between and amongst each other on bilateral issues of mutual concern and regional issues. And this transcends down to each and every member of our respective organizations. And Dr. Khaled has been instrumental in introducing more purposive outcomes for our defense ministers meeting, where we attempt to tackle pressing issues that affect our people's security, not only for today, but for the future. Thank you, Dr. Khalid, Excellency, for your warm welcome this morning. And Dr. Hakim Pul, of course, the personification of ASEAN, let's put it that way, and who has worked tirelessly across several time zones, several countries, in order for us to achieve the goal of a truly powerful, resonant ASEAN, which will be a zone of progress with lasting peace and stability. Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, Ambassador Kim, the rest who are here, and I'd like to also greet, although he's not here today, so you're stuck with me, Admiral Sam Caparo, who unfortunately could not make it. And all the participants, a pleasant good morning to each and every one of you. My task today is to give Philippine perspectives on regional security. I think in absorbing what has been said earlier, and knowing I can just say one word, and that will capture the Philippine perspective on regional security. But I'll not do that. Because it would waste everybody's time, and we are here to find convergence and solutions. And I'm really glad that we are here talking in a defense forum where we are tasked to translate into more practical terms the aspirations of our leaderships and our countries. We make sure that these outcomes, desired outcomes of our leaders, unity, and other values that are good, are achieved against threats, which is why we have to speak in an atmosphere of trust, confidence, and candor, because threats are real. They evolve, and they have a direct effect on the safety and stability of each and every one of our citizens, and collectively our region. And I believe the challenge, but the duty of everyone, is to articulate threats and to deal with them in an open, transparent, and candid manner, so that, especially in the era of fake news, our words are not twisted. We speak clearly in language which admits of as little interpretation as possible. As your defense establishment stress, accuracy in communication and precision in communication is key to military operations. I shall try my best to live up to that standard. And as you know, this conference is structured into three. International military law, I'll gloss on that, on the Philippine perspective. Operations, not too much. That's the field of all of you who are here. We do deal with it on a policy basis, and on a governance basis, but that's for you. Of course, we'll touch on it a little bit. And lastly, strategic engagement, proudly, which is the most important outcome that is expected, Dr. Khaled, Dr. Kao, and me. And here, probably, let's spend a little time. In MILOPS, the Philippines had the opportunity to address and co-host the MILOPS conference in Manila. And at that time, I appealed for your support to help the Philippines become a global order in enforcing and upholding a rules-based international order and norms of international law, and not to let us in the Philippines be a victim for following international legal processes to the letter and for standing up for values of international law that are beneficial to all and not only Philippines. Right? So these are convergence points that I'm pointing. We also thank you not only for expressing solidarity with the Philippines, but also for resisting unilateral attempts to distort agreed upon interpretations of international law, particularly the law of the sea. Sure, there are some differences among ASEAN member states, but this is the major difference. Because of that pervading climate, which is reaped from people working together and people seeing the shared destiny and value of working together, we trust each other. Sure, we have differences between each other, but we will not allow and must never allow these differences to divide us here in ASEAN. And in this, the Philippines is with you in order to preserve our centrality, in order to gain genuine neutrality. And as Dr. Kao said earlier, neutrality is not a static condition. It is something that we must achieve and maintain. Now, the Philippines has been consistent with framing all its international engagements in a security dimension on the basis of international law. International law, as we all know, and not as it is attempted to be redefined. I think that's clear for all of us, and I think that bits of no debate. So in our international operations, it is always the rule of this international law, maritime law, UNCLOS. And this is important because in the Philippines, the unique security situation of the Philippines, which is undoubtedly, and I think beyond debate, severely under threat. Our maritime domain is severely threatened daily by China as it attempts to threaten the rest of the ASEAN neighbors who are co-claimants to areas within the South China Sea. And no other ASEAN country is experiencing the same kind of aggression that the Philippines is facing today. And so, we, for our specific needs, because if there is no territorial integrity and sovereignty of the Philippines, there will be no ASEAN. And we need, therefore, as a duty to our own forefathers, as a duty to our people, and most importantly, as a duty to the future generations of Filipinos who will be working with your children and children's children to build a world hopefully much, much better than we live in. We need to fight for our territorial integrity and sovereignty in the face of severe challenges against it. So, for the Philippine defense mix, we need internal resilience, as we all need it here in ASEAN. If our ASEAN defense establishments are not strong in themselves, then how can we collectively enforce norms in the future? We'll be always compromised by some external force which wants to distort the international legal order. Admittedly, there is such an attempt. ASEAN has a shared future, vision in 2045, and we should stick to it, not other shared future visions that are nebulous and non-transparent. And so we are fully in accord and fully supportive with ASEAN on that. So, given that threat situation, and as vivid as 100 nautical miles away and even nearer from our coastlines, the violence that has been done against our Coast Guard and our Philippine Navy, the disruption of the lives of our fishermen, who have been generational fishermen there, demands that the Philippines address these issues in a very, very whole of country method. To not address these issues now would be to do a big disservice to the future generations of Filipinos who need that collection of 7,600 islands, who need all of that and its maritime domain so that they can live. So, we have to have defense resilience, as everybody here does. There is another dimension to that, and the Filipinos, were a beneficiary during the eruption of Mount Mayon 2 years ago. It needed a collective response. And I called out personally to my ASEAN defense colleagues to, if they could assist us. Malaysia was one of the first, Indonesia was one of the first, Singapore and Brunei, all sharing the burden, together of course with our US, Japanese and multinational allies. Climate change is such that there is no choice for us but to converge anywhere in the world and anywhere in ASEAN. So, internal resilience is necessary for two things. Number one, if our internal peace and stability within one country is not secured, of course, under a regime of law, with adequate protections to everyone, then how can we be an effective contributor to the regional collective security architecture? It's a fundamental building block, our defense resilience. And the only question is, are we using these capabilities and strengths responsibly. And I think ASEAN has proven that it is truly not a hegemonic bloc. So, on the second part of the mix, our international alliances. This is very important to the Philippines, given, number one, its history, number two, its location, number three, its challenges yesterday, today, and hopefully not the future, but we have to be there. A very important part of these alliances is ASEAN. Because ASEAN's stability, peace and security is essential to Philippine peace and stability and Philippine defense and security. Why? Simple, in simple terms. We look to our ASEAN brothers to help us as we do them in case we need it. More so in this environment and space we're talking about. So, if there is instability within ASEAN, it affects the Philippines. Not only because of the cohesiveness of the regional security architecture, but also our people. We have a lot of people-to-people ties, and it granulates down to life. ASEAN's centrality is a fundamental building block in unity and stability for Philippine external defense and security. Now, is it sufficient? We need, for Philippine total defense resilience, pre-existing, predating ASEAN, and evolving defense alliances and relationships with like-minded countries. Now, this is where the international military law comes. In order to form and to judge the basis of what kind of alliances will serve purpose, you have to look for encompassing interests, values, interests, and principles that are common to all participants. If not, the alliance becomes an opportunistic, perhaps even monetary partnership. But that is not what defense relationships are made of. They should be based on values. And the most concrete expression of those values is international law. A shared commitment to uphold international law, because this forms the limitation of what we are doing now and what we do tomorrow. And it is a guarantee to the world and our neighbors especially that these alliances are for an encompassing value. If it is for an encompassing value, a converged and shared value, then it means that it shall not be used against anyone, but against someone who would like to disaggregate or disengage from generally accepted principles of international law, UNCLOS, and other treaties. And in this endeavor, the Philippines is doing ASEAN a service by standing up for the rule of international law in the most direct and concrete manner, given its threats, at great sacrifice to our people. But our people don't mind because they're fighting for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of their country. And in this, the cladding here is that international law in a way which is transparent, in a way ASEAN interprets it, in the way between ASEAN member states they have taken their issues. And might I just point out, Malaysia and Singapore have submitted several issues to independent tribunals and abided by the decision. In the same way, the Philippines regards our approach to territorial disputes, maritime disputes, in the same way, in the same manner the rest of the ASEAN countries have done so. Several disputes, although on this side, on the western side of ASEAN, and not on the South China Sea, have resulted in binding international judgments which have been ruled upon by duly agreed upon independent third parties, who both parties trust and live by the outcomes. None has refused to participate in a fair proceeding. And that is the example we take in evolving our international legal systems and our international legal processes. Philippines never took unilateral action. Never did. First, it's not in our spirit to do so. Secondly, for all practical purposes, how can? Right? So, I've shown all of you the importance of international law and incorporating that narrative into MILOPS, because it is the litmus test that all MILOPS activities, from planning, activities, and finally, behavior of each and every participant must remember. And what are these convergence legal points? International law, UNCLOS, and generally accepted principles of these and other laws that govern conflict and govern military personnel. So that is the cladding of all our operations. And we translate this cladding into what kind of operations we do. The Philippines has embarked with like-minded countries, maritime cooperative activities, not only with our treaty partners, not only with our SOFA partners, but also with other countries, even extra-regionally, that share the value of international law, particularly the value of freedom of navigation on the high seas. The high seas are not owned by anyone and cannot be claimed by anyone, by any line, whether whole or dashed. And we need, in the face of a constant threat, to make it a new normal, to push back. I don't think anyone here has an option but to push back. We have all relied on the concept of freedom of navigation in the high seas for our own survival, survival of our people, for our growth plans, our supply chains, And if this value is cut at the source, then you know what happens. It will be the hegemony of one. Second, we also are very conscious in planning these that they are deconfliction mechanisms. And what are the best deconfliction mechanisms? International maritime, air, or land regulations that are published worldwide. Strictly adhere to those. If there is no adherence to that, I doubt if any of our convergence partners would join any multinational and multilateral cooperative activity. Thirdly, these defense engagements are but part of the total engagement we have, which each and every country from each and every region. These defense relationships, just like a sturdy cement floor of a house or structure, serve as the security cladding for sustainability and convergence, particularly in the maritime domain. No economic or other partnerships, no cross-border transactions, no sustainable and predictable and rules-based regime of international trade, commerce, movement of people, telecommunications, and the like will be sustainable without this fine security cladding. Just like one would build a house, it must be clad in protection. And so, because of the situation in the West Philippine Sea, the obvious are challenges that are being addressed. But what is beneath this challenge? It is the desire of the Philippines to be part, together with ASEAN, together with our Pacific Island neighbors, of a stable and open Indo-Pacific as an essential element, not only of Philippine, Pacific Island, ASEAN growth, but world trade and commerce. And with world trade and commerce comes border controls of people. Migration of people is really a reality right now. We can see it in Europe. And without the security cladding that we put, because of these engagements, regionally and extra-regionally, we cannot protect our borders against the most granular of threats, that of human interaction. And we will not be able to respond, or even, more importantly than respond right now, to preempt threats from happening, which we need to do, whether or not we have formal defense relations or otherwise. It is a mandate of every state to the international community of nations to actively work with each other to prevent threats, particularly of threats that can evolve into worldwide challenges. So I've given you the cladding, why international law forms the basis of international military operations and forms the linchpin of Philippine external defense engagements. I've given you the importance of ASEAN and the centrality of ASEAN into our defense mix. Now, I will be remiss, my duty to my country, if I do not address a topic which I believe is important, following the lead of our ASEAN brothers and others, and this being the 10th year anniversary of the Arbitral Award on the South China Sea. And by the way, the Arbitral Award on the South China Sea forms part of the linchpin of our international defense and security engagements. This landmark ruling reaffirmed the peremptory nature of the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. All of us agree that it applies to us. Well, not all, but at least some of the principles there apply, even though if you don't formally stick it. I'd rather have a partner, not a signatory, than a partner who is a signatory and says it applies it, but it doesn't apply it in a way we know it. So in a scale of values, I'd prefer a partner who is not a signatory, who conforms to it, rather than somebody who is a signatory and claims to uphold it and does not do so against the Philippines, most specifically. But I'll move on. And we thank several countries for recognizing and a unanimous EU. We are also grateful, of course, to our treaty partners for amplifying this collective message through this MILOPS conference, or giving me the opportunity to amplify. My point here is that the Filipinos have won through this arbitral award rulings of the Permanent Court of Arbitration, which not only benefit the Philippines, but benefit all of us here, particularly those who are similarly situated. And I believe this arbitral award should be viewed in that context. And I urge everybody to listen to these points. Might I share too that our external defense engagements are shared by 86% of our countrymen. So we speak with confidence that we have the voice of the Filipino people, and we take pains to make sure that that voice is heard as it was given, and not as one would want to interpret it. So we speak with their voice, 86% of them, in a free and open plebiscite. Polling, not a plebiscite. Polling. Maybe there are some other numbers, but not credible enough to match the average 86% by credible polling firms. Now, how do we see the convergence points? Bear with me. I shall look. I structured my speech. However, I gave the main ideas because I wanted to absorb the spirit of the conference and see how I could be of value. So, number one, there were important legal points that were made on the arbitral award. And bear with me. Number one, the arbitral award ruled, and most importantly for all, because I believe nobody supports the notion that the 9-dash line of China is valid. The arbitral award in no uncertain terms ruled that such a 9-dash line is without any basis in law. Okay? I think that is important for all of us. Secondly, the arbitral award ruled that any signatory to UNCLOS binds itself to the principle that UNCLOS is fundamental. And no amount of historical narrative can reduce a commitment of a state party to the binding effect of UNCLOS. Thirdly, China's historical narrative is not based on historical fact, but in fact is of recent vintage. That is the ruling of the arbitral award. And I do not see how this ruling can be but beneficial to all claimant countries, in which the Philippines secured this not only for its own benefit, since it was lodged in an international tribunal on an open and transparent manner. The Philippines is bound by the ruling. However, the principles enunciated in the ruling are available to all. It sets a precedent for all to use, not only for the Philippines, in the fundamental findings of the tribunal. Fourthly, claim that artificial constructions within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone and extended shelf are illegal. And I'm talking about mischief-free. Everybody here agrees, bar none, that the militarization of mischief-free, creating an artificial cement and weaponized island by China was illegal. If at all, the arbitral tribunal ruled it would only be the Philippines which would have the exclusive right to permit or to regulate any constructions within its exclusive economic zone. And lastly, on the question of Bajo de Masinloc, it's within our EEZ and it is an artisanal fishing ground of Filipinos. It is important to note that Bajo de Masinloc or Scarborough Shoal is now named by China as an island when it is a shoal. Given our experience with Mischief Reef, that an island appeared overnight, when it was guaranteed that Mischief Reef would simply be a refuge for fishermen and would always be used for peaceful purposes. Now we have a different outcome. And renaming a shoal an island signals an intention which, once again, may repeat itself if we just allow it to happen. And Bajo de Masinloc, Scarborough Shoal, 100 nautical miles from Luzon mainland, where the fishermen, particularly of the town of Masinloc, Zambales, for generations have been calling it their home fishing ground. That's why it's named Bajo de Masinloc. And history has that. So these were rulings of the arbitral tribunal that I think are very important for each and every one to consider. They are non-controversial for all of us. And for this, I believe, the Filipinos were inspired by our ASEAN brothers to bring it to a proper tribunal under the 1982 UNCLOS, and they won a victory which states generally accepted principles of international law for the benefit of all. And because it benefits the Philippines, who else does it benefit? It benefits ASEAN. Because ASEAN is within a very important part of the Philippine context. I'll move on. I've said, I hope something that will help us converge rather than to diverge, and something which must be used as an instrument of unity and convergence rather than to allow it to be used as an instrument of division, disunity, and discord. Today, it is undeniable that China's behavior to this hour has become more aggressive on several fronts in the West Philippine Sea. The United Front Works of China and disruptive activities of its nationals in the Philippines continues to play a significant role in weakening our economy and in weakening our population through several means, which is not unique to the Philippines, but unique to ASEAN. Illegal gambling hubs, cybercrime stations, illegal mining, critical infrastructure vulnerabilities, drugs, crime. These activities, coupled with the misinformation and disinformation that is happening, is not unique to the Philippines, but is part also of the toolkit for any target country. And I think we all know that happens. And the United Front Works propaganda is used to disengage all of us. And this is very important that we stress this now, which is why I laid down my premise with convergence points that are universal to all of us, so that we are aware, and we feel it the most in the Philippines, that these United Front Works, the illegal, coercive, aggressive, and disruptive activities are real. Normally, we call these tactics gray zone tactics, as you are familiar with. But they're not so gray insofar as my country is concerned. And so, we disaggregated the gray zone into illegal, coercive, aggressive, and disruptive activities, of which examples are rife in the Philippines, and it is for the record. So, we know the threats that the Philippines is facing now. Why do we know and this is a very important aspect of our approach. The Philippines, because of the fact that it realizes the value of, insofar as our territorial integrity, sovereignty, and security is concerned, the value that facts come out, that processes be structured, open, that there be mutual trust and confidence in a sustained and protected manner against disruptions has a fundamental value in its operations. That's called transparency. We have embarked on a transparency initiative where we show the behavior to all, not merely to a closed and censored media, to all the world, for all the world to see. There is nothing for the Philippines to hide. And this is evidence of the legitimacy of our unilateral, bilateral, and combined operations. And it is also in this spirit of transparency, openness, that the arbitral case was brought. Why? If there is no transparency, how can you gain inclusivity? So we lodged all of these actions with transparency because a goal is inclusivity and convergence. If not, it would be useless. And which is why we are all here. We are converging. So this transparency initiative has been pushed back against by China and several. But for the Philippines, our constitution, our values, and our psyche does not allow us the counter value of being non-transparent, which is why we are open to bilateral negotiations, but on a transparent manner. There is also an internal value for the Philippines. Why? It's because we have to go back to our population and tell them, because we are a democratic country, that what was done was for their benefit. And a lot of people who do this, or everyone, has an accounting in the end of the day to a democratic population. A very vibrant one and robust one, believe me. So, transparency is a fundamental value. Now, we are here in Malaysia. I failed to mention that we had to look for a convergence norm, which is a work in progress, given the uniqueness of the Philippines. And I posited an idea for everybody that converge in the Philippines. We have the notion, we have the uniqueness of having several convergence partners with fundamental disagreements. And we are blessed with the fact that for the Philippine interests, everybody converges. Probably they wouldn't have done that were it not an open and inclusive narrative and a trusted narrative on the part of the Philippines. That goes not only for our international, extra-regional partners, but it also goes to show our ASEAN neighbors that the Philippines has only their best interests in mind. It is called the archipelagic sentiment. We are one of two archipelagic countries in ASEAN. And between Indonesia and the Philippines, we are the archipelagic country whose character is under attack. Let me talk about archipelago. One of the reasons why the Philippines fought tooth and nail for the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea was not merely for exclusive economic zones, so forth and so on, but to enshrine our character as an archipelagic country. And it is fundamental to our existence. Because without that doctrine, our country would not be an integral whole. It would be a disjointed collection of big islands, some with their own territorial sea, some with their own internal waters. How can you govern? How can one attempt to define a country without territorial, integral unity? Very difficult, particularly with 7,600 islands. So, we are allowed to draw our baselines. And from there, we proceed. Now, if there were overlapping boundaries, I'm confident that with the example of our ASEAN neighbors, we will resort, as we do resort, to peaceful, legal, and transparent means to solve these overlapping claims. It's different, though, with China. Now, without that archipelagic doctrine, how will we be able to secure the future of our country with a very rapidly growing population and a habitable area which is reducing? And it continues to be smaller because, like our Pacific Island neighbors, we are subjected to severe climate change challenges which make habitable areas which are at a premium available. Philippines is 80% water, almost 20% land. So that archipelagic doctrine is very important for us. Therefore, we have a special interest to be an archipelagic sentinel. And we want your support for this, because a strong Philippines is good for everyone. And a guardian of freedom of the sea. The sea is our life. Why? Simply because we're an archipelago. We are not an archipelago, we have a land border. The sea would not be as important to us, but now it is the only, together with the air, absent any land bridge from the rest of Southeast Asia or any other place, is our only means of communication with the rest of the world. Therefore, it is for our interests that freedom of navigation are there. And this transparency initiative, by the way, and I will do not do justice to a Philippine diplomatic star and an icon, the late General Carlos P. Romulo, was president of the UN General Assembly, and he said, "We, the small nations here, are the Davids who are not afraid to fling our pebbles of truth between the eyes of the blustering Goliaths and make them behave." I think that embodies the resilience, spirit, and pride of the Philippines and our ASEAN neighbors, and anyone who respects the dignity of their country. I've talked about ASEAN centrality. I've talked about the Philippine challenges, which are unique to the Philippines in terms of external aggression. And I'm very happy that our ASEAN brothers and sisters have not felt this aggression to the same extent as we do. And the reason is, and I shall cover it in my closing, because of our unique geographical location. And in doing so, I will present the uniqueness of the Philippines, which is distinct from the rest of the ASEAN, and why we are challenged. And I will posit a value proposition. I think we talk about ideal values like unity. It's an aspirational goal and worth fighting for. But on our level, to be effective, we must have more effective values. And the value I'll use is synergy, where working together will make a better thing for all of us on more quantitative indicia and outcomes. Synergy. And we synergize and synchronize our operations. Let's go to synergy. It's more of a value proposition, and it's more real than ideal and aspirational. And as you know, the Philippines is a Pacific Island country, as it is a Southeast Asian one. This is important because the Philippines has a different ecological makeup from the rest of ASEAN. And significantly, aside from the blessings, the ever real to us Pacific Island countries, specter of increasing ravages of climate change to us have affected us in a way where the rest of ASEAN is not. Vulnerabilities to climate change and makes it an especially hard challenge for the Philippines, especially when you consider the archipelagic nature of the country, which makes effective response very difficult. And, typhoons, we see volcanic eruptions, earthquakes recently, subsidence, sea level rise, all affect us in a very real manner. Together with our Pacific Island countries, the vulnerabilities of the Philippines are the same. This is another value worth considering. The Philippines is distinct from the rest of ASEAN because it has an extensive Pacific Ocean maritime area, which no other ASEAN country has. So the Philippines is the only ASEAN country that straddles the South China Sea and the Pacific Ocean. No other ASEAN country, I repeat, has that. Which is why also, obviously, the Philippines is a principal target of a country which has no access to the Pacific except through Philippine waters on the South China Sea area. Okay? The Pacific Ocean boundary is extremely important for the Philippines, together with the Benham Rise, as much as the West Philippine Sea is important. We put equal importance to these areas. So geographically, ASEAN has no presence in the Pacific Ocean. It has, politically and legally, a relation only because the Philippines is a member in good standing and in spirit of ASEAN. It will only have a significant presence in the Pacific if, and only if, it recognizes and realizes the Philippines as that link to the Pacific, which is equally important to ASEAN, in order to make it an effective crossroads of trade, commerce, sustainability, and most important, at this day and age, resilience, and vice versa with our Pacific neighbors. Therefore, it follows, if ASEAN wants unimpeded access to the Pacific under a regime of UNCLOS and our trust and confidence, it follows that ensuring Philippine entitlements as a whole under UNCLOS and the arbitral award is in ASEAN's interest. And for this, we commit because we have committed to a rule of international law that convergence through maritime law is not only for the benefit of the Philippines, but for the Philippines to steward both for the Filipinos and its responsibilities to ASEAN and the rest of the world. And if ASEAN does this, it will have been a seminal event in defining ASEAN solidarity and securing ASEAN as a premier advocate of international law. And the Filipino people will not forget this defining move that is rooted in law and not in subterfuge, in genuine converged interests and not splintered divergence. And to me, this is ASEAN and the true spirit of the ASEAN spirit. So I thank you today for listening to me, and I hope some of my words made sense. And I meant every word I said. It is a wish, it is a plea that my words be given some consideration because I believe it reflects what we need to be doing, although faster in this day and age. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay po kayo lahat.